Hello and welcome to the Prismatic Congress, a broadcast by the Prismatic Imperium based in Cubio, an active player group that makes up part of the Ashling Deval community and specializes in roleplay. I am Mistler, Lord Warden of the Branch of Vigor, and it is Sunday, the 15th of March, 3306 at 2200 hours. This episode will be a little somewhat special episode again, because we have another interview. Unlike the last episode, which was with Captain James T. Flint for Flintlock Engineering channel, this time the interview will be pre-recorded and you will find it at the end of the podcast recording. More about that later. We will, of course, start with our show as we usually do with regular game news and branch news. About general news. First of all, after Paige Harvey left the Frontier team as the community manager, a new face has appeared, and Bruce Garrido has taken the position as a new community manager. His nickname on social media is Gambit, and he has been previously a community manager for RuneScape and is a veteran of story-rich RPGs, which he also plays alongside in his free time, he said. And yes, he's now on the Frontier team. He has already participated in the Frontier live streams that happen once to twice every week. And we will hear more from Bruce as Frontier has new social events and announcements to share. Beyond that, in the last Congress, I spoke a little bit about that there was a clarification post about the reduced Galnet, and there was a clarification post for that clarification post that explicitly stated in one line that there are currently no plans to return Galnet news articles that are not relevant to the story as you can experience it in the game right now, as well as no plans for community goals and interstellar initiatives. So they are entirely focusing on the big patches that are to come. As we talk about big patches, there has been another interesting note, the link to which will also be in the description of the podcast, which is that the Fleet Carrier update and the next big bug fix patch update we've been waiting for, those will actually be one single patch. So that is now clear. Last week I've said that I'm expecting the bug fix patch for sometime in April or May, but now it is confirmed that these are one big update. So we will probably get a beta that has both of it then, or maybe they are doing this in separate steps. We don't know yet, but we will find out anyway. So as we approach summer, we will hear more about this big update and the two parts of them. And with these general news done, let's move over into branch news, and as always, start with the Branch of Vigor. This is me talking for the Branch of Vigor again, and this week I don't really have much to say. The current project with having more external objectives for the Branch of Vigor is still going on, and as I already said last time, that I'm excited to try this out and see the response. This continues to work, I think, fairly well. We have a lot of participation, so that makes me very happy, and we are continuing on that very same path. As a minor note, I am happy that I also saw last week that an old red name returned, who has in fact just joined us in the recording channel on Discord too. Alan Quatermain is back and is a red Vigor name that was there even before I joined this group, and I'm always happy to see old players return and be active, and he's proven to be very active both in terms of helping with our objectives but also with the roleplay of the group. So yeah, that is great news for the branch, I think, also. Other than that, there's nothing else to say. If there's new things coming up. You'll definitely hear from it in text, and always make sure to keep an eye on our objectives in the mission boards. And now let me hand over to the branch of Sight and Lord Headmaster Techeron.
Greetings, it's me, your one and only favorite Lord Headmaster. Now, I know there are a lot of students and probably millions of citizens who are pretty angry about me right now. So the site's colorful exploration event concluded, and we had a lot of beautiful screenshots. And yes, I know, I didn't took part. I didn't took part in my own expedition. I'm very sorry about that. And the fact that the reasons why I didn't took part are classified are probably the reason why a lot of people are pretty angry about me. But let's forget about that. The observatory has a lot of interesting and exciting projects ahead. Like the one I'd really want to address right now. Because in around 15 days, Drew Vigor will start his lore tour. If you want to take part, just submit a request for his private group on PC, Xbox One or PS4. He already invited me personally into his private group, so I'm looking forward to see what's going on there. Join me and you will receive some diamonds and of course reputation as well. With that being said, Sites has something exciting coming up over the next weeks. I can't talk about it right now, but it will definitely increase our reputation. So, that has been everything. Now please, stop the messages, stop the spamming emails. I'm not a bad person. And on the next expedition, I'll definitely be there. Now up to mind.
Hello, it is I, your Lord Harold. Definitely your favorite person in the Prismatic Imperium, no doubt. I do have exciting news. While the other branches are definitely suffering from all sorts of syndicate control and infiltration problems, the branch of Mind is, as always, completely squeaky clean.
Ha ha ha.
Yes, so off to business. I've had a pretty busy week this week. I am working on stuff behind the scenes for the story. I know it's been a while since the main event has progressed, the main season, and I took a look at what I had for Chapter 4, Deep Space, and I went ahead and finished it, knocking out the map, which is one of the things that was holding me back. And so now that I have that map finished, I'm doing a little bit of revision with the script, and I'm hoping to have that run this month. And so I'll try to schedule out a good time that works for everyone. There will be announcements. There will be opportunities to check in, and so we'll figure out a time that works best for the most people that are willing to participate. I can run up to realistically, I want no more than 12. I don't expect we'll get 12 people, but we could run up to 12. In lore, I can run up to 31 people because there are 32 pods, and one pod is currently decommissioned. That would be pod 4. If you don't know why pod 4 is decommissioned, you obviously need to catch up on the story because there's something juicy there. And yeah, the other big news is I've been working on character portraits for the Codex and for just characters that can show up in the future. One of the characters that I finished today is Darko, so I'm pretty excited. I decided I was going to Photoshop a mechanical arm onto him, and I decided I'd go ahead and sculpt it out in ZBrush and stick it on his character. And I just threw like a metal texture because I didn't get too complicated with it. I only wanted to spend about 30 minutes on it. So I'll just go in there with Photoshop and color it up a little bit. But that was kind of an exciting project to do. So I'm pretty happy with what I have. I posted it in RP discussion so you can check it out because it could be a while before it shows up anywhere else besides our codex. So since Darko is dead now, it's kind of after the fact that I finally get around to doing a portrait for him. And last bit of news is, I've been really excited about some of the roleplay that has happened in the last 2 weeks. Things got busy again, which was really exciting. And Alan has done quite a bit with his accidental rental of the entire Trapeze Island resort. And so that's been really exciting to see, where he's been using the channel the way I had hoped rented channels would be used. And so it's only a matter of time before he really gets his returns on that. For now, he's posting every role play activity he does, which earns him reputation, and it's of course going to have an impact on the story in as many ways as I can fudge it. So really excited about that. I want to see where that goes, but I don't want to discount the other things that have happened this last week, and so just try to keep up to date with the highlighted roleplay channels, because there is some good stories to be told. And that covers it for this week's Branch of Mind, I believe.
Very nice, thank you. Yeah, there's progress. You've already shared the images of Darko. How does it feel to make a portrait for a character that is dead?
That's the neat thing about this season, is we're going back in time a lot with the Hollow system. So the simulation center. So really, he's not entirely gone, but yeah, it is interesting that he's dead. On a technical side, his character was really interesting to make because he is a giant. He is over 9 feet tall, and trying to really just emphasize some of his proportions in. I was really pushing things to some limits because I think I mean, I'm not overly skilled with setup as an artist, to be honest with you. But I was really trying to show, this guy's huge. He's usually crouched over like Quasimodo, and even still, he's just this towering monster, just this mountain of meat. I believe Kurt put it once, and somebody who's got shoulders so huge you could lose your knife in it when you try to stab him in the weakness points on his armor. So that it was interesting on the technical side because his hands are twice as big as his head, and it still doesn't quite look it. In fact, his mechanical hand is larger than his real life hand, and even still, I was having perspective issues where I just wasn't achieving that huge, bigger than life look without having any background elements, or perhaps him holding another soldier. But I'm pretty happy with what I have. It will certainly work for the codex. There is going to be a little bit of photoshopping that goes into it, so he's not wearing just whatever it is he's wearing. So a little bit of customization. And the floating orb, if you're wondering what those are, I have lights in my scene that show up as orbs, and I just got to delete them out after the fact.
Right.
So yeah.
Is there any interesting background story to Darko that explains why he is so disproportionate, or is it more like artistic freedom?
That is very much artistic freedom. His backstory is more or less he comes from a very cultural people that are very secluded from the space life. So you don't see as much of the genetic wash as you do with most people in Elite Dangerous, where they're used to space travel. They all kind of show up at around the same heights. They all have similar lifespans. Darko, it comes from something that's a little bit more of an ancient culture that developed sometime after the expansion into space. So I really don't have a lot of details for his backstory yet. And I don't know if I'll ever come to a point where I need to fully detail it unless people want to see more Darko types. That is always a possibility in the future. But as for him personally, no, he's got an extremely complicated name. I wrote out his name. I liked his name, but I realized there was no way I was going to remember his name. So I kept the original name, and then he has a new name that he goes by, which when he left his home, his clan, he went by that new name, which was Darko. I know the last name I can't even pronounce. I think it's Mahadata, but I just have to
Interesting.
check back with its spelling every single time. And so
Yeah,
that's he's interesting, that's for sure.
he's not in the codex yet, right?
Not yet, no. And it was only because I didn't have any artwork for him that I didn't
Okay.
bother.
So we can expect this to change very soon then.
Yes.
Cool. All right. Time to officially head over into the prismatic discussion section.
Prismatic discussion. Prismatic discussion.
Well.
Prismatic discussion.
Hearing this this intro again actually reminds me that it was nice to hear from Jeff again. So he's at least still alive.
Yeah, that is good to hear. By the way, everyone that's present, you can unmute. Feel free to join in on this discussion at this time.
Yes, absolutely.
I will be around for a few more minutes. So, specifically you, Alan, if you had any questions for me, now would be the time to ask it.
Thank you. So, firstly, it's a great honor to join in the esteemed lords and their prismatic congress, and I'd like to thank you, particularly you, Lord Whistler, for your leadership in Vigor. I've got to say that there's been some really hardworking people in that group, and they've done a lot of work, particularly Ryvar. I think he single-handedly turned around some systems. And thank you again for the kind words about what's going on in Trapeze Island in the channel. Really enjoying taking those roleplay activities and taking that in game, and it's helped me really get past the dryness that I've been experiencing with the game itself. So just an open invitation to anyone to join that channel, and have some fun. It's a luxury island, so go to town. But really looking forward to the opportunities to take what we do in that channel and bring it into something in game itself. So any ideas, thoughts about ways that we can do that would be fantastic. And from your side, Lord Harold, Kevin, Marcy, I would really ask just for your continual support, inspiration, thoughts and ideas. Really would love to engage newer players and older players, and any ideas and thoughts on what I could do better, or that would be really appreciated. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I definitely intend to work more with you on some of that, because you've been presenting a lot of exciting material, and you've been doing it by yourself, which is fun to see. Usually I would be jumping in for all of these opportunities. I've had a very busy couple of weeks, so I've had to just keep it on the back burner, but I am keeping up with what you're doing, and I am formulating plots that really will broaden the scope of what you're doing. Because what's most important to me is getting other players to bounce into each other, to have meaningful interactions. And you've got a really good self-contained story that is working really well as for developing a foundation.
Thank you. Yeah, I really want to involve more players. And I've tried reaching out to the Lord Headmaster and the Lord Warden, and yet I need to try and reach out again to get them to hook them in. If you can see what I mean.
Just tag me, I'll be there, hopefully. Oh, by the way, I have a tip for you too. A very important tip for role-playing in the future.
Go ahead.
Should you ever get your hands to Marcus hacks, don't ever use the hack that says, do not ever use this hack. Because some people can't understand it.
That is very situational, but it is a good tip indeed. Yes. Missler, you have some role play that I'd really like to work out with you, just to really push the plot forward. And I am curious to hear from you what your thoughts are for the next Vigor RP event.
the issue currently is less thoughts, but more having all the people jump in again, because there's so many involved, but it's currently going really slow. I'm currently not totally sure what I can do to speed that up again. So yeah, this went a little less fast than I was hoping for. So we probably have the issue that I'm not out of prison by the time we have the next season chapter going on.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of how I feel about it. We've got you locked up in what I like to call roleplay hell, and you haven't even deserved it, but you're there.
But truth be told, I locked myself in there.
Yeah. But it has been a while, and I think there are things that I can do that will not dampen the situation at all. In fact, the stakes might be higher, but I would like to see you at least released from that position. But there was another thought that I had.
And watch out. He's going to release you in the Kevin Macy style, like it's 6 a.m. in the morning. A random Isaac Spencer appears.
But honestly, it's not a position I mind too much, and we are fairly close to getting this through. It's really just getting people ready to be there and help with the final push. So it's not a position that I mind. It's just that it hasn't been going as fast as I'd like. Partially because just too many people that would have to be there simultaneously.
Right. No, it's nice to have Vigor finally be cleaned up, and the next thing is I was intending to go to the branch of sight next, but I might actually jump to the branch of mind instead with the syndicate infiltration plot, and I might work it back and forth, maybe sight and mind at the same time, just to keep that moving. But I really want to get my character involved.
We really like to be involved in this, please.
Yeah, I have to take a back seat, of course, in the story, but I think that I'm missing a lot of really creative potential with my character in particular. Since I've got the most history with my character development wise, so it is the oldest
What a surprise.
character of mine that's here in Elite Dangerous. So it's kind of weird that I haven't been able to roleplay as myself.
Well, I can remember back in the old days, you always said the Lord Herald doesn't exist.
No, that is a Vector article, and that remains to be published occasionally.
You know,
Month.
the Lord Herald is something like the Stan Lee of the Marvel movies, because he appears sometimes, but nobody knows who he is.
Well, you can't look far without seeing my face on a building, or a blimp, or a billboard.
Yeah, but meeting you in person is actually something entirely different.
Yeah, and it actually be me and not someone disguised as me.
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone's talking about the Lord Herald. Everyone knows the Lord Herald, but if the Lord Herald stands in front of you, you'll just think it's an ordinary civilian.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And it won't be long now. If I wait too long, it's going to be my children stealing the show. The Lord Herald's daughters, they're going to be stepping in and becoming famous.
You know what I'd really like to have again? One of these TPM parties where someone dies.
Yeah, we need another one of those. Maybe another commander lynching. I'll definitely consider my options. But it's been great. I've got to head out early, so I'm going to be taking off. But I do invite you to check out the interview we will be playing later on with me and my roleplay expert, the guy who inspires me, Adriel. So definitely check that out at the end of this. But thank you, guys.
Thank you. that's already a great bridge because we're already very close to the half-hour mark for our live recording, and the interview is about 33 minutes. So with that being teased right now, I think this is the perfect time to just head over there. And this is an interview with Adriel, who is part of our group and has role-played under the name of Nikki Bonafesta. And it is an interview Kevin conducted about the topic of character motivation and roleplay conduct. It's a very interesting interview about that is especially interesting for people who want to get into our roleplay and who want questions answered like what are ways to design your character and how to dive into roleplay with your character. So check out the interview, which will start now. And other than that, see you next week.
And now for a special report with Adriel Torrentino, known as Nikki Bonafesta. So go ahead, Nikki.
Hi there. Yeah, I'll be going by Adriel for the course of this. I'm talking today about character motivation and kind of the roleplay conduct of your guys' server for Prismatic Imperium. So I've been a DM for D&D for a number of years now, about 4. I know a thing or two about just creating characters, how a roleplay game kind of flows like it is with you guys, and I'm here to talk about that today.
All right. Well, thank you. That's exciting. So I think the first topic I really want to get into is just some basic character motivations. And so my first question for you is related to creating your character for roleplay narrative.
All right. Well, there's some general rules to follow in all role-playing games, but obviously we want to keep it kind of specific to what you guys are doing, so you know it's useful. So first thing we want to cover is just kind of, you guys have a little bit more unique of a character creator kind of thing, because you guys are also tied to a game. Now that game, it requires you to create kind of a persona to start off with, although from the sounds of it doesn't give them a lot of personality. So first thing you need to consider is, all right, you guys are commanders in this game. And to my understanding, commanders are kind of the Illuminati of this world. There's not a lot of them. There's a lot of you guys in the server, but in the context of the lore, where we're talking, galaxies and billions of ships, you guys are kind of the top honchos, 1% of 1%, all over the place. So you need to keep that in mind, is that unlike D&D, where you're kind of a nobody who walks in and, you kind of gain reputation, you guys start off as just kind of these guys who can bypass rules and get connections immediately, basically wherever you go. So that's the first thing you need to consider. You're not a nobody. And on the context of, on the same kind of line of thinking of being a nobody, you also need to have a function. You need to have a role, because you're not a nobody. You can't be a guy who's just going around cleaning up houses or something and then slowly find adventure. You need to start off with something. Like you need to start off as a bounty hunter or some kind of researcher. Because in this world, especially a free-form world like this, you need something to do in this world. It won't be given to you. You need to find something to start off with. And that's where you can start your backstory in.
So yeah, we've really got like 3 main tips for people getting started. And three rule sets for when you join Elite Dangerous and when you join our server as a commander. You are a member of the Pilots Federation as established. And point number 2, you didn't steal your start ship. That is a benefit of the Pilots Federation, so you gain that. And you likely didn't live on Earth. That's the third point. The odds of living on Earth in a time when Earth has been repopulated as a sanctuary world, as a park reserved for the super rich, it is not impossible to live on it, but it would be very unlikely if everybody came from Earth. So just some tips for being creative with your starting out with your character. And so yeah, you kind of covered, don't be a nobody. It's hard to be a nobody. You need a function. So be inspired by your game activity, your career. So let's go ahead and move on to the next question. So I would like to know a little bit about character dimensions. Do you have any thoughts on character dimensions?
Right. Well, the basic line of thought on that is that you have three kinds of characters. You know, you have your first dimension of character, you have your second dimension of character, and your third dimension. You know, everybody says they want the third dimension of character. No, they don't. It's very hard to do a third dimension of character. So I was going to give a little bit of a description on each so you have an idea of what to go for. So the first kind is the first dimension of character. These guys are very shallow. Like on D&D, we call them murder hobos. The idea is that, you know, this character doesn't really have a past, doesn't really have any kind of character. He's just there so you can be in the game and kill stuff. You know, it's just perfect. Just this is my vehicle in this world. Doesn't have any impact. I'm just going to screw around with it. And that's fine if that's what you're going to do. I wouldn't suggest it for this one just because there is so much lore and backstory going into it. So yeah, I would suggest, because this is the one I like, the second dimension of character. Now, second dimension of character is typically just, it has a little bit more of a grounding. You know, they have a past, they have some motivation, they have a personality. Thing is, though, is that they're not really people because they don't go deep. People are conflicted and they have different motivations and backstories going into them. So the second dimension is just good enough to where you have a believable thing going in with the story, but it doesn't go so deep to where you have to consider all of those deeper motivations. Now, if you are going to go, well, actually, first off, a good example of the second dimension is Marcus Capallo. You know, he has a fun personality. He serves a function that's very critical in the world. But past that, he doesn't really have much of an inner dialogue going on. Sometimes he has a little bit of one, depending if the story needs him to. But it's not something that's constantly happening because he doesn't need to have it. You know, third-dimensional characters are a lot of work. So, speaking of which, that brings us to what a third-dimensional character is. A third-dimensional character, you know, basically it's the closest thing you're going to get to an actual person in a role-playing game. It's someone who has a deeper motivation underneath what they're doing. Like the best example I've heard is, say you have a character, you know, and he's a ranger or something like that. He goes into the woods and he hunts for deer, let's say. I'm using a D&D example, but I think it'll still track. Is, you know, this character goes around, he hunts deer, and he brings it home for his family. You could have an inner motivation of, oh, this character doesn't actually like his family. He had this kind of thrusted upon him. You know, that really will never show in his actions. He'll never, like, kill his family or anything because he's a third-dimensional character. He hates his family because it's restricted his life choices, but he still feels responsible. So that conflict is quiet, it's going on in the background, but it still influences his choices. You can do something similar where, okay, you know, here's my character, here's what he wants to do. He feels this way about the world. This is what's happened to him. This is how he feels about it. You see, in the end, it's really just a lot of thinking about this character in the sense of what are they thinking at all times? What are they feeling? What are they hiding? You know, and that can be very difficult. If you want to go for it, that can be one of the best characters in the game. But I typically stay away from it just because it is a game. You know, if you want to do it, fantastic. If not, that's also fantastic. Just don't be a murder hobo.
Well, thank you. So yeah, that really clarifies that. Jumping into a third question. Jumping in. This is a big one. How to jump in, getting started with your character. Because from observations, I know a lot of people have a hard time getting started because they're either intimidated or you know, whatever it is that makes people hold back. And I'm always encouraging people to just jump in. Do you have any tips for how someone could get started with their character in our role play?
Well, at this point, we assume you have a character, right? We assume you have some kind of a background. He's from here. He wants to do this. You know, you're giving him something of a purpose. And the thing about this kind of freeform game is you really kind of have to just take charge of where you're going with it. Because like in D&D, you know, me as a DM can sit aside and go, okay, I want you, Mr. Jeff, to do this, you know, and you want to do this. So I'm going to go out of my way to make it happen. You know, I think that's kind of what everybody expects from a role-playing game. The guy in charge will make something happen and I'll interact with it. Problem is that there are a lot of you. You know, you guys have a pretty good DM in yourselves, standing for Diamond Master in this case instead of Dungeon Master. But there's just a lot of you. He can't do that with every single person that comes in. You know, he has a life. Unfortunately, he's not a computer. So that means that you guys have to take a little more of the responsibility. This is still possible, certainly, but you guys need to be, okay, I know what I'm doing, I'm going to go after it. Now, as someone who started out as a Nikki Bonifesta in this, I kind of understand kind of the obstacles that get in the way, right? You feel like, okay, I don't know what's happening, I can't get involved anywhere, I don't know my character, I can't get involved anywhere, and I'm not sure where to make the story go forward. So you just kind of stick to the sidelines and not do much. And unfortunately, that's kind of the wrong response, because that just actually just shoots yourself in the foot. Like, for this, like, Kevin here is going to work with whatever you do. You know, just jump in, basically. You're not going to know everything starting out, and you don't really need to. You know, just be like, let's give you an example. So let's say my character is someone named, like, Tom Green, something basic, right? Tom Green is a student that is at the university you guys have, and the Emerald Observatory. So let's say he's a biology student, and he's studying a rare kind of plant life that appears on a planet far, far away. You know, and he's here because you guys have the material to actually examine it. So now I have a purpose of, okay, I'm going to be spending time here. No, I'm going to look into this. No, suddenly, if you just go in, you're talking to some of the other players, you're going forward with your own goals. Maybe Kevin looks at that and goes, okay, that's a rare plant. Maybe this rare plant is needed by the villain of this arc. Or maybe this rare plant is needed by a very important NPC. Suddenly, your character is involved and is very important because you're the only person that can figure out what's going on with this plant that you made up. And that's the goal here. You're contributing to the story by using your own creativity. You don't need to go by the beaten path that has already been set before you. You can make your own thing, and that will add a new flavor to the game that wasn't there before. You know, and that's the point. And that can be scary because suddenly you're accountable for things, you know, that happen in the story. But it's just best to jump in. You know, what's the worst that can happen? You make a story, maybe the plant turns out not to go anywhere, suddenly you need a new purpose. You can do that. You know? Just don't worry about that kind of thing. Just go in and have fun. Second piece of advice I can give you is just, though you don't have to follow the beaten path, it's good to interact with it. Like, you guys have a lot of good NPCs out there who can really get you started in the lore here. Like, I know that the good starting one is definitely Marcus Di Paolo, just because you can go up to him, he'll get you started on some goofy quest lines, you get to like him, and suddenly you're part of this world the more you interact with them, you understand what's happening, and you're off to the races. Suddenly it's easier to get your goal done.
Thank you. Yeah, I've definitely tried to make it possible for Marcus to reach out to everybody who goes through probation. It's not always easy to do, but at some point it does happen. If it doesn't happen fast enough, you can always contact him. So both he and Anthony Jacob Burge are both great resources for starting out in character when you're looking for assistance on how to do something. But yeah, thank you. Those are all really good points. Which brings me to my next question. Interacting with other commanders. What do you have to say about interacting with other commanders, which I think is quite important for the way our narrative system works?
For sure. Because from my understanding, the ways you guys got to set it up is that you control a lot of kind of what's happening on the outside, but that doesn't mean much unless the players interact with it. That's just role-playing 101. But because there are so many commanders, they hold the lion's share of the power here as far as where the narrative is going to go. So it's very important that you work with the other players in order to make something happen. Now, the biggest thing that I've seen just kind of from playing the game, from what Kevin's told me, is that information kind of sticks with 1, maybe 2 to 3 people when it comes out. Now, at first, that doesn't seem like a bad idea. Just because, okay, here's my character, he knows something, right? And I want him to know that. He's going to go interact with this information. He's not going to share it because it's his story. Problem with that, though, is that there are a lot more players out there. And Kevin, when he makes an action, he needs to make sure that he gets his buck for his buck, you know? The thing is that if, say, Kevin puts out a very essential piece of information, right? And this is going to be like the crux of the arc, where this is going, right? If one person holds on to that, no one else can interact with that piece of information. Because unless they want to get into metagaming, which we'll talk about in a minute here, no one else can do anything. suddenly we have a ton of people, from what I understand, 50 to 60, that are just sitting and watching, but they can't interact with it. And that's a bit of a problem, just because now our role-playing game, which is based on community storytelling, is now just watching a guy do something cool. And people like watching people do something cool. But for something like this, they want to be the person doing something cool. And that's just something we need to understand in the meta of this game. Now, I would suggest passing on information, just because that has a number of just positive effects on the game. For one thing, if you share information, suddenly your character has a grounding with other characters. I know some people have some issues, like setting up their character and knowing what their personality is. How do they fit into this world? Well, the number one way to do that is interact with other players. Players that already know what's happening in the world. Suddenly, your character has a relationship with someone important. Someone else that are in this, pilot federation. If I know who Kurt Austin is, and I know what he does, and I give him something, kind of like how Nikki was giving him information, suddenly there's a relationship there, and suddenly your character is a lot more real in this world, because you're interacting with real people in the world. Now, and then that also helps just with general friendships in the game. Suddenly, oh, that guy gave me some cool stuff, we went and did this together, and then suddenly the social aspect's being fulfilled as well. There's just a lot of good reason to do it,
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that definitely helps with building relationships and squads. And I think having, squad groups is pretty important. You just end up seeing the same characters joining into the fights together, and it's kind of creates like this Gimli and what's his name? Orlando Bloom's Legolas, thank you. Gimli and Legolas kind of dynamic. That's always fun to see between two players. And so
although as a final piece to that, just because I'm thinking that people want to know how to put that into action, just get a chat, decide okay, we're going to meet up in a park or wherever you want, basically, as long as it's feasible. We're going to meet up here, we're going to talk, and suddenly you can play off an environment for the information. You can really get creative with that. The main point is just pick a place where these characters would meet up and share some information. That's important.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Okay, my next question for you, and we even mentioned that we'd be talking a little bit into this. I want to go into role play conduct tips. What do you got for us?
Well, the two major categories that we'll talk about today on this is just the metagaming and power game. Now, first one we'll touch on is metagaming. So, metagaming, for those who don't know, is the idea that, okay, my character doesn't know something in-game. He doesn't know this building is going to blow up on Tuesday. But I want my character to go over there and stop the explosion, because let's say this building means a lot to my character. So I decide that, okay, even though my character would have no way to know that this is going to happen, I'm going to pretend, because I know, I'll just have him go do it. And this can be a bit problematic, because a good part of this game is realism and allowing people to have opportunity to do something that I can't do. Now, if I were to go off on that, I could be accused of metagaming, simply because suddenly, let's say, TTMJ was going to go solve this problem. Suddenly, I'm there and I'm helping out, but I had no reason to be there. I can take some fun away from TTMJ, and that's obviously not okay for a game where we're supposed to be doing a community thing. Now, problem is that oftentimes with metagaming, there is a legitimate reason for doing it. That being just, I have some kind of investment in what's happening, but I have no way to know. And that frustration leads me over to acting in some way. There's also another way where you're just kind of being a jerk and wanting to do it, but let's pretend like we're all rational people here. And that happens for a good reason. So, how do we deal with this problem? Now, I feel like this problem would definitely help with the sharing of information. Because if it's a frustration that's building, sometimes you just got to get over it. But I feel like if you have enough people who have that information, suddenly there's no need to metagame. Okay, I know what's going to happen, so I can go interact. So, sometimes that shouldn't be the case, but it should definitely be the rule. It should be the rule that everyone knows what's happening so they can interact. If someone can't act because they don't know, that should be an exception. Because right now I think it's the other way around. And that can cause the problems and frustration, and it definitely just disencourages any kind of player interaction. Because I don't know and no one's going to tell me, so what's the point? And that's not what we want. We want everybody to be involved, everyone to have a good time. Now, the other thing is that I heard of an event recently where a player basically had, like, in character, didn't really have a solid reason to know something, but because the character was fairly intelligent, it was Kurt Austin, because he's fairly intelligent, there was some reason that he could show up, right? And he wanted to. And that ended up helping the narrative in the sense that suddenly there's someone to go spread some information out for what happened, otherwise it wouldn't get around in character. But there was a little bit of a claim of, okay, that's metagaming, you know? And sometimes you just have to allow that exception to happen. Because remember that this is a storytelling game. Sometimes we need to make exceptions for the sake of the story. Because if we always just go with straight just, well, this is the rule, well, that's not how this works. This is a role-playing game. The rules are subject to whatever the story needs. Because in the end, that's just what we're here to do. So I'm not saying, okay, whenever you feel like it would make a good story, go ahead and break the rules and pretend like you know everything. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there's a way to have the best of both worlds. I think the best solution to that kind of issue of, okay, you shouldn't be metagaming, but also we want a good game, is just explain how you know. If Kurt Austin, looked at the TV and was just like, okay, I hear a certain kind of gunfire that only belongs to this person. I see a belonging. I see a certain fighting pattern, something. Because it is a smart character, suddenly there's a grounding in lore of, okay, this character determined based on this was happening, and went off of his hunch and went off. That's not like the most solid solution, but it does allow us to have a bit of reality grounding at the same time as having a good story. I think it's just a good rule of thumb of explaining things that are going on in your character's head. Just because it lets us get to know them better, and it lets us to understand why and where they're going.
Oh, thank you. That definitely explains metagaming. And I appreciate you targeting our Vice Herald a lot there. Sorry, Kurt. But it does
you're a
make
very good
some,
example.
It does make some good examples. So yeah, that really describes metagaming and kind of shows you how you can work around it and with it, and even use it to your advantage without it being something that spoils the fun for others. So I like that. Did you had another thing you were going to go into?
Oh yeah, power gaming.
Okay.
Now, power gaming in D&D, if it happens, everybody immediately calls it out. And that's just because D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, you don't know, man, I've been saying D&D a lot, power gaming is basically just, this is a role-playing game where it's very free-form and you can say whatever you want to do. But thing is that in role-playing games, we have barriers, in the form of dice rolls that say, okay, you're attempting something just because we don't know if you're able to succeed. So power gaming is when you bypass it and just say, okay, this is what I do. Like, first thing I think we need to explain for this is attempts and givens. So basically, we're in a role-playing game, and I say, okay, I'm going to walk through this door. I'm not going to ask you to roll a dice to open the door, because of course you can open the door. You have an arm and you have a hand. They both function. The door opens. We don't need to get into the detail. But if that door is locked, suddenly, oh, that's not a given anymore. I need you to roll to unlock the door. You can tell me, okay, I'm going to try to kick it down. We're going to see if you can get it down. You can say, I'm going to pick it. Okay, let's give you a roll to see if you can pick the lock. There's an attempt there. That's the difference between an attempt, something where we're not sure if you'll succeed, and a given. Of course you'll succeed. Now, power gaming is when you bypass an attempt to just get to succeed. If I look at like the door and it's locked, I go, okay, I kick it, it falls over, I walk in, and everything's fine. Well, then the DM suddenly has to look at you and go, well, no, we have to roll to see if you're strong enough to knock down that door. And then we get this kind of weird reality thing where we have to backtrack and make sure it happened. Now, there's a lot of minor cases that'll inevitably happen with this in any kind of role-playing game, just because it's freeform. But it becomes a problem when someone is just using it to basically win it all the time. Like, I hear amazing stories where people are just like, okay, I kill everyone in this room, your character dies, I spare you, and that's my turn. It's like, whoa, buddy. Hold on, I'm here too. I get to roll a dice. Chill, So the big thing with power gaming is that just you need to keep clear what's a given and what's an attempt, Like, I think DMs aren't perfect. They're not always going to make clear what's an attempt and what's a given. But when they do make clear what is an attempt, I need you to roll a dice to show me, or I need to roll a dice to see how successful this is. You need to respect that. Make sure that you're keeping track. You need to pay very specific attention to what is an attempt. If you see, okay, this is an attempt, I need to respect a dice roll.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually wanted to add to that real quick that it doesn't just apply to dice rolls for our group, but also applies to player versus player interactions. So that is a good free form way of, since this is text based narrative, no one's going to be giving you hints if something is an attempt or a given. So basically, whenever you are working with another commander, always give way to them having a chance. So basically, everything is an attempt when 2 players or more are involved. Everything is an attempt. So that way, any other player has the opportunity to take an action that would otherwise contradict your action if you had not stated it as an attempt. That just keeps the narrative flowing strong, so we don't have to backtrack and edit things so that it doesn't look like you said, I performed this action, and then the player 2 prevents you from performing the action you said you just prevented, especially since these things are kind of happening at the same time. So yeah. And of course, players have the freedom to roll dice for anything they do, even if it should be a given. That is a freedom that you have. The bot allows you to roll dice, and it's up to you if you use it or not. I will sometimes ask you to roll a dice if I'm DMing a session, and that's pretty rare. And sometimes I will roll dice behind the scenes for my own activities. But you have the freedom to decide if you want to roll dice or not to. If you prefer leaving things up to chance to create a new level of dynamics, that is your freedom. So thanks. I think that really covers the conduct tips. And so I really wanted to move on to our last question. Mortality and failure. And so this is really just going into kind of finishing off with character motivations and a little bit about investments. And so I know you probably have a lot to say about mortality and failure.
Oh yeah, no. This subject is definitely something that very much interests me about your guys' role-playing game. Just because mortality and failure are definitely the center of any game. Just because every game needs stakes. That's just fundamental. If we're playing Candyland and I can win in 1 turn and you can win in 1 turn and nobody succeeds, there's no point. There's nothing to lose. Every game needs something that can go wrong. We get fun out of games because there's that tension between I'm going to succeed and I might fail. Like in D&D, the tension there is, will my character die? Will I succeed at what I need to get done? Will I get to develop this character and make like a family kind of unit with the adventuring party? That's the whole point of that game, because there's the tension of that. In your guys' game, there's just no way to die. Unless there's some little niche ways that I've heard about, but in general, a player just won't die from some kind of failure. So tension needs to be somewhere else. Tension needs to be failure of actions. If I'm trying to do something, the tension comes from I might not succeed at that thing. And this gets a little bit more into the kind of power gaming aspect as well. I think a lot of people want to power game because I want to make sure I succeed for my goal. But I don't think they realize that by doing that, they undermine the whole point of the game. If it's impossible for me to fail, I get bored, and that's it. Basically, in this game, we have our narrative, and it's going at a very clear pace. It's going in a direction. It's going to get there at a certain time. Now, we can't risk that. There's too many players to really be bendable with that aspect of the game. So what that means is that the only place where failure is going to take place is with individual characters. Kurt Austin tries to shoot someone from a mile away, his gun gets jammed. Oh no, that's it. That's where the failure is going to come from, and that's the only place it can come from. Now, because of that, it's very important that each individual player be willing to fail. And that's just really the end of it. I like naturally as players, we want to succeed. That's where the excitement comes from. I want to succeed versus the chances of failure. And that's where I get my value from it. Problem is that in a game like this, if you take that too far into power gaming territory, suddenly you undermine the game, not only for yourself, but for everybody else. So it's important that whenever a dice is rolled, whenever a player is against you, whenever something bad might happen to your character, you need to be willing to say, okay, this happened. It's time for me to take the L, so that way this game stays exciting and there is a core conflict to it.
I mean, who watches a movie where the main protagonist kills the bad guy right off the bat, and then the rest of the hour-and-a-half film is celebration of the victory?
Oh yeah, no, we need our we need our friend to die. We need the wife to get kidnapped. We need something, so that way we want the guy to succeed for sure.
Right.
Yeah. So now I give you guys this advice just because it is just something every player of every game is going to come across. We need to create that tension, but we also want to win, and we can't be untrue to either. So we have to find how to be true to both. And the balance there is just be willing to lose when it comes up. And then use that, the best players that I know, they don't look at their failure and goes, dang it, I got to come again next week, and then I'm never going to lose ever again. No, those players, they'll look at it, they'll go, ugh, that sucks. I hate that I lost. The dice, blah, 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 the character, blah, 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 everything went wrong. Okay, get it out of the way. And after that, they have to go, okay, next week I'm going to come back and I'm going to react to this failure. My entire family died and I didn't stop it. They don't say, dang it, my family died, I have to go figure out a way to revive them. They might. But the right response is to look at it and go, okay, my player's character died, or family died. Now it's time to go, okay, I'm going to go get the guy and get revenge. I'm going to go find a way to bring my family back. You need to find, with every failure your character faces, it's not a chance for I lose the game. It's a chance for, where does my character go from here? Failure in real life is the best way that people grow. You can simulate that in a game. If my character fails in some way, to whatever degree it was, what does my character do? Does he get bashful? Does he double down on what he did? You can take it lots of directions, and that will really help you develop a character. Because the best way to develop a character is to see what they do when they fail.
Yeah. Wow, thank you. Those are some good tips, and glad to hear it from you, considering you are the DM for our campaign that we do outside of Elite Dangerous for D&D specifically. And so I have to remind people that I don't have experience with the role play stuff. I just ran the People's Media, and that turned into what we have here now, and it was a whole new world for me. So I learned the things that I'm hearing from essentially a collection of what you guys have been saying, and now to see Adriel really backing that up with the things that he does in our weekly D&D campaign, it's extremely helpful. So I thought it'd be really good to share some of those things with you guys to really help you get started, have some motivation for your character, not be too intimidated to jump in, and just some basic conduct tips so that nobody's getting upset with each other, but we're all working together on a really good narrative as a community book that we're essentially writing called the Prismatic Imperium. Thank you, Adriel. I think that brings us up on time. I appreciate the interview.
Oh, of course. This was a lot of fun. Call me back if you'd like any other talk. It's cool.
All right. And if you have any questions for Adriel related to roleplay, feel free to bring them up in text, and we can formulate a reply to all this with him. So that's it. Thank you.
Bye.